Hi, everybody. I'm Mike, and this is Mike Miller Talks Life. Today's thought: we don't just drift in good directions. Drifting is an interesting word. It can refer to something peaceful and relaxing. I remember when I was a kid, I grew up in Alaska, and we had my friends, a group of us that we just hung out, played in the woods, did adventures, all kinds of craziness. We had built a couple of rafts, and one fun thing to do was just get on this raft and get out in the river. And it was kind of slow and easy moving close to where we lived. And it was just relaxing just to be there and go down the river and look around. And it was just great. But you had to keep your eye out because there was a point when the river would begin to pick up speed. And if you weren't careful, you could go too far and then you couldn't get back. Couldn't get to the shore. Drifting can be peaceful, but you got to be careful. In old westerns, I love watching old westerns, and they're real corny, but they're kind of fun. And there was a certain person that everybody was suspicious of, and it was the drifter. They weren't welcome. They would drift around, ride their horse around, kind of a free spirit, no roots, no commitments. And they often were troublemakers, or the community thought they were troublemakers, but really many times they just drifted toward trouble. So in these small Western towns, they were really resistant to the drifter. And often the town sheriff would greet the drifter at the edge of town. I don't know how they knew a drifter was coming, but he would confront him. And what's your business here, drifter? It's sort of like the old Western language for, can I see your ID and driver's license for riding that horse or whatever? Drifters weren't welcome. Drifting appeared to be just kind of a free-spirited, do whatever kind of a thing, but wasn't welcome. We often hear about drifting, and when we hear about it, it's drifting away from something. Like we drift away from a healthy diet. We start dipping back into the chocolate chip cookies or dipping back into the ice cream or other treats like that. And we're drifting away from our healthy diet. For those that are in sober living, many times they can drift back into using. They just drift back. They're not careful. They're not checking with their sponsor. They're not checking in with their group, and they can start drifting away. Marriages can drift apart. Our faith, a big warning in the New Testament, is to be careful. Don't drift away. It happens. We drift away from our commitment. We drift away from our excitement about our faith. And then our faith is no longer a vital part of our life. It's just like hanging around our shoulders, making us feel bad. It's not making a positive difference. We've drifted away. Drifting starts small. We coast along, slacking off in a few areas. And then it just sort of blossoms into a major move in a direction away from something. And we're often caught off guard. We think, wow, that happened quick, but it didn't. It was a slow, progressive thing. I was reading an article about drifting, and the author made this point that life is often a matter of drift versus intention. We can drift along. We can do whatever we want, do whatever we encounter, or we can be intentional about what we're doing and where we're going. Drifting can be very interesting at times. It can lead to some real adventures. It can lead to some fun things. But it also carries with it boredom, because there's more to our life than just floating around. We need to dig in and develop our potential, our skills, our talents. And drifting is not about that. To achieve and maintain a good, healthy, productive, fulfilling life, a life of purpose and growth and strong family ties and character or depth in your life, our quote says, we don't just drift in these good directions. Part 2 says we discipline and prioritize ourselves there. We have a tendency to drift away from the good, the right thing, the best thing. And this means we really need to be intentional and prioritize and discipline ourselves to move toward the good. Intentional, prioritized, disciplined kind of living, kind of not easy. And when you talk about it, it doesn't sound that fun. I don't want to do it. It's hard. It's demanding. It's filled with some choices of doing things that are the right things. Sometimes you don't really feel like doing it, but you override that feeling and you do what needs to be done because it takes you where you want to go. Drifting is way easier. It doesn't really require much. It's just drifting along, but it's also drifting away. Drifting is taking the path of least resistance. You hit an obstacle, you drift around it. Drifting. I remember seeing, my friend had a rowboat and a small boat. He lived on a small little lake, probably more of a big pond. And he had a little dock there and this rowboat. And it was a lot of fun just to go out and calmly row around. And I liked it. I mean, I'm not a swimmer, so I had to always be pretty careful and wear a few life jackets just in case. Well, I go down one morning, I was going to go out on it and play around, and the boat wasn't there. And I glance up, and there it is, way out, away from the dock. Somebody did not anchor it. They didn't tie it in place, and it drifted away during the night. It wasn't available to be used. And sometimes in our life, we can forget to anchor our life in the correct priorities and disciplines that'll take us somewhere, and then we end up drifting away. These disciplined choices, these priorities, this intention serve as an anchor to keep us not necessarily in place, but keep us moving in a direction that we really want to go. An intentional life is filled with some benefits. It provides opportunities, and we're able to grab them and run with them because we've been making some of those choices along the way to develop ourselves. People who drift, opportunities come their way, but they can't really run with it because they've never really developed their life to take advantage of that. We will be a blessing to other people. We will have strength of character, our depth in our life, fewer regrets. Our life will be more fulfilling, strong relationships. These things don't just happen. We can't drift into this kind of a life. A fulfilling, good life is about deciding. And you decide first, what do you want? And this involves, what do you want to be as a person? What kind of person do you want to be? And what do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish in your life? Who do you want to impact, and how do you want to impact them? If we have children, we always want to impact them for good. And is there something about your life that they would want to model that would actually take them in a positive direction? How can you be a servant? Servanthood is a major key to a life of substance. And then you want to ask yourself, what does it take to get there? What does it take to move me in that direction? See, I'm not talking about some high-powered life, a successful life, making big money, having a lot of expensive things, achieving the top place in your field. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And we're free to make those kinds of choices. I'm talking about the good life, which is the kind of life that will sustain you throughout your life. Wherever you go in life, it will sustain you. A life of character, a life of impacting for good, a life of purpose, not directionless living, a life of service, not self-centeredness, a life of fulfilling healthy relationships. This is the kind of life that sustains us. And you don't just drift to this. You don't accidentally bump into it and there you are. You must be intentional. Andy Stanley's quote says, we don't just drift in good directions. We discipline and we prioritize ourselves there. Hey, thanks for listening. Hope this is helpful and thoughtful for you. Maybe encouraging a little bit, or maybe just so like a little boost to, hey, keep going in that good direction. There's payoffs. And maybe you know somebody that maybe needs to hear this. You could share it. So I hope you click like. Hope it was helpful. And I'm very grateful you tuned in. And until next time, I hope you have a great week.